He moved through the darkness of the airport perimeter as if he had rehearsed it, even though nothing in his life suggested he had ever done anything like it before. It was early morning in San Jose, the kind of hour when airport crews were focused on flight prep, not on the chain-link fence outside their routine path. A thin 15-year-old climbed through a gap in the fence, dropped to the ground, and paused as if listening for someone to yell. No one did. He kept moving, hugging the shadows beside warehouse walls and maintenance vehicles, driven by a decision that had formed in his mind with more emotion than logic. He didn't carry bags. He didn't have a plan beyond leaving. The flight he approached happened to be a Hawaiian Airlines Boeing 767 bound for Maui, already humming with activity. As ground crews finished checks, he slipped beneath the aircraft, staying low until he reached the landing gear. The metal frame towered above him, cold even in California's mild air. He grabbed a hydraulic brace, pulled himself upward, and folded into the narrow wheel well cavity. No one saw him as they tightened bolts, inspected tires, and stepped away from the aircraft. He curled into a corner, unaware that the temperature at cruising altitude would drop enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. He didn't know the air above 30,000 feet could starve a person of oxygen until the body simply shut down. All he knew was that he couldn't stay where he had been. Running had felt like the only choice. When the engines roared to life, the wheel well shook hard enough that he had to brace his feet against the metal to keep from falling. The smell of jet fuel seeped into the compartment. As the plane began its taxi, vibrations rolled through every surface, rattling the lines above his shoulders. He held tight as the aircraft accelerated down the runway. When the plane lifted off, the landing gear swung upward, folding into the compartment with massive force. The wheels rose toward him, filling the space, and he barely avoided being pinned as he pressed himself against the back wall. The wheel well doors sealed shut, leaving him in total darkness. The temperature dropped immediately. At first, it felt like a sharp cold, the same kind he had known on winter mornings. Within minutes, it sank past freezing. His fingers stiffened. His breath came out in short, shallow bursts. As the plane climbed into thinner air, the pressure inside the wheel well didn't equalize. Oxygen levels sank. 10,000 feet, 15, 20. His hearing throbbed. His chest tightened. His thoughts scattered. At around 38,000 feet, the cold bottomed out near 60 degrees below zero. Hypoxia began shutting down his higher brain functions. The darkness around him wasn't just the sealed compartment anymore. It pressed into his mind, slowing everything until he slipped into unconsciousness. Most stowaways never made it past this point. The body cannot function long without oxygen, and the cold damages tissue within minutes. But the boy's metabolism reacted in a way that would later puzzle doctors. The extreme cold slowed his bodily processes so much that he entered a state resembling suspended animation. His brain used almost no oxygen. His heart slowed to a minimal rhythm. The cold that should have killed him preserved him instead, holding him in a fragile balance just above death. The flight lasted more than 5 hours. The wheel well remained a sealed chamber of ice, its metal walls coated with frost. When the aircraft crossed the Pacific, cabin passengers slept, watched movies, or settled into the quiet routine of a long-haul flight. Beneath them, the boy lay unconscious in a space barely large enough to hold him, his clothes frozen stiff against his skin. His core temperature plunged. His pulse weakened to a faint, irregular beat. But he did not slip over the edge. As the plane neared Maui and began its descent, air pressure gradually increased. Oxygen levels rose just enough to stir faint biological responses. The wheel well shook as the landing gear prepared to deploy. When the doors opened, sunlight blasted into the compartment for the first time in hours. The wheels dropped, jarring the entire frame. That impact sent a vibration through his body strong enough to nudge the slow climb back toward consciousness. He didn't wake, not yet, but the process had begun. When the plane touched down, the heat of the Maui runway began warming the metal around him. Ground crews rolled their equipment into place. A mechanic performing a routine walk-around inspection spotted something on the landing gear assembly, what looked like a shoe, partly wedged behind a hydraulic line. He stepped closer and realized there was a leg attached to it. He called out sharply. Others rushed over, expecting to find a body frozen solid from the flight. But as they approached, they saw the boy's chest rise, just barely. He was alive. Paramedics extracted him carefully, lowering his stiff, ice-cold body to a stretcher. They recorded severe hypothermia, dehydration, and oxygen deprivation, yet nothing indicated permanent brain damage. He was rushed to the hospital, where heated IV fluids and oxygen therapy began reversing the physiological shutdown. Hours later, he opened his eyes for the first time since leaving the ground. He looked around in confusion, unable to speak more than a few words. The doctors told investigators he had survived conditions that normally killed within minutes, let alone 5 hours. Aviation experts later reviewed footage and security logs. They found the breach in the fence he had slipped through. They reconstructed his path across the airfield. No one could explain how he avoided detection, why he chose that plane, or how his body endured the nearly impossible combination of cold, altitude, and lack of oxygen. They could only confirm the outcome. Against every known survival statistic, a 15-year-old had endured one of the deadliest environments on Earth and stepped back into the world. He remained under medical observation for days as his memory slowly returned in fragments. The full experience inside the wheel well never resurfaced. Instead, he carried only the knowledge that he had lived through something almost no one else had, and that every minute of his survival defied what experts believed possible. His recovery marked the end of a journey that had nearly killed him, but it began a long conversation among investigators, doctors, and aviation officials who understood just how narrow the margin between life and death had been. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.